Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host, Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechvalley.com. As you can see here, columnist for the Jewish Press.
I have a column called Albany Beat, and I enjoy doing all of that. I talk about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. And anyway, we have a special guest with us today, Michael Seereiter. He's president and CEO of the New York Rehabilitation Services
Rehabilitation Association.
So, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you.
And what is your agency or your organization about?
We're rehabilitation. Which way? Physically, mentally?
Our organization actually grew out of the vocational rehabilitation movement from a number of decades ago. So any individuals who were looking for services and supports to try to gain meaningful employment in our community, that was really who our organization served. And we've kind of grown up in that world, and employment still seems to be a heart and soul issue for our organization. So we represent them here at the state level.
You like that someone's just out of a job, maybe because, like they're saying, manufacturing is, being lost around New York State. Hey, I was a manufacturer. Now I, working on the line, and now 10 years later, they just bounced me. They brought the jobs to Mexico, and now what am I supposed to do?
Typically, this has has been focused on people with disabilities, so people with developmental disabilities, psychiatric disabilities, physical disabilities of a variety of sorts. Those are the individuals that have typically relied upon our organizations, the members of our organization, for support.
And you interact with basically Office of Mental Health and...
Office of Mental Health, Office for People with Developmental Disabilities now, yes, and several of the other state agencies.
And you train these people?
We have a number of components. We actually do two things, one of which is we really have an advocacy arm here in Albany on the government affairs side of things when it comes to public policies that are pertaining and influence or impact, I guess, people with disabilities across the board. And in supporting our members, we do try to provide technical assistance and training to those organizations so that they can improve the way in which they can help support those individuals and help individuals as part of a larger social mission, I think, for all of us, helping individuals with disabilities find opportunities for inclusion in their community.
Well, I'm more aware of BOCES, but that's for younger people?
Yeah, those are for school-age individuals typically and young adults, yes.
And then still people don't have the skills?
And they transition from the school system and the educational system into many of the support service systems that our members provide services for. So we are many of our organizations are contracted or licensed by the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, a lifelong condition, contracted or licensed with the Office of Mental Health, sometimes can be a lifelong condition.
One of the things that they're saying now, and I think would be maybe a problem, because, I've met people with BOCES before, and maybe developmental problems can do very simple work, maybe on a production line. But now they're saying people are being laid off because there's so many robots and there's computers, so they don't need like the simple person anymore. Maybe they need, lawyers and doctors. You still need to be trained. But just a simple person on the manufacturing line, would that possibly hurt your kind of? Those are the jobs maybe they're looking for.
Yeah, and just like I think anyone in our communities, it's very difficult to paint one particular population of people with one brush, if you will. So we have people with developmental disabilities and psychiatric disabilities who have very wide-ranging capabilities, some of whom are extremely smart, are extremely capable, but may have physical disabilities, or may not have as many mental capacities, but may have some of those physical capacities. But when it does come to jobs and job availability, I think that that's a major problem or a major challenge, I guess, for us as a community and for us as a society, is to find meaningful work opportunities for people with varying abilities. And yes, I think that there are going to be increased pressures on employers, on businesses, to hire individuals across the board, including people who have fewer skills perhaps, as some of that manufacturing technology does take over, and you see some of the computers being able to do what humans otherwise used to do.
What's the place on Crumpkill Road locally here, that Nice Star or whatever?
I think you're speaking of the Warren Washington Albany NYSARC chapter, the ARC, yeah.
Okay, but on Crumbkill Road,
Yes.
there's a facility that used to do mailings and, production to raise money to, and they used to use the people with developmental disabilities for that.
They are one of many of probably the better part of 85 sheltered workshops or work centers here in New York
Now, they
State.
changed their name because there was another company that took over.
I'm not familiar with that
New
particular.
Horizons or something?
Okay.
Does that sound familiar?
I know the name, but I can't
Okay.
remember about the name change or not.
Okay.
But they are, as I said, one of probably 85 organizations, provider organizations that are also employing people with disabilities
Yep.
in that kind of an environment, many of which are also our members.
On a very practical level, I teach and I have like 10 jobs, like I say, and, I'm just thinking of prisoners that they need to come out and all they do is mop the floors. And, you need something more skilled from that. I'd like to ask on that. But on the other hand, just even this is a real case, that a 20-year-old and has a little bit physical disabilities, but functionable. And, I'm trying to say, well, go into this, go into that. I mean, what would be the first step? Let's see what you can do. Let's see, what vocational, not trained for anything, just one, like you say, basic schooling.
I think your question speaks to a larger societal shift which we're seeing, which is a focus on deficits and moving away from that focus on deficits toward a focus on abilities, and really having that exploratory conversation with individuals about what are their interests and gaining skills in those areas of interest that they can then go and apply in a meaningful way in their community so that they can participate in that community that they belong to.
How does raising the minimum wage impact your folks?
A very complicated question. When it comes to individuals with disabilities, I think we're going to have some significant challenges, kind of along the lines of what you were speaking to, where businesses are likely to see some greater difficulty in their ability to employ people in the lower wages. Equally important here, I think, is individuals who who support people with disabilities across the board. And we actually see a huge impact on what we typically call direct support professionals in the OPWDD realm, people who support individuals to live and participate in their community, whether that's in a residence, whether that's on the job, whether that's in a number of day supports or volunteering in the community. We are very challenged by this recent agreement on moving the minimum wage. We have been making the case for the need for an extremely large amount of resources, quite frankly, to be able to handle a 67% increase in the minimum wage. Many of the workers, when we look at our staff or the members of our organizations, their staff, they make, in the OPWDD realm, we did some surveying, they start wages between $9.62 an hour and $10.78 an hour. And while that is good, we also face between 10 and 20% staff vacancy rates right now, pretty much throughout the entire system. So the ability to recruit and retain quality people to come in and do that job and support individuals with disabilities as they pursue their life goals is really challenged. And unfortunately, what we have here in the agreement at the state level with the very small amount of funding that was agreed to be included in the budget is essentially relegating an entire sector of people who provide services and supports essentially to minimum wage. We will move those individuals who do not currently make minimum wage, that up to $15 or up to $12.50 point, we will move them to that point and nothing further. And I think that poses significant challenges for these organizations to continue to provide these services and the management structures that they have.
But it's over such a long period of time.
Not a very long period of time. When we look at historical increases in the minimum wage, we've actually seen many increases in the minimum wage since 2000 or so. Okay. And they are 6%. We're taking pretty large ones across the state now.
Well, my point was that if by the time you get up to $15, it's really more like $13 in today's dollars.
You may have an increasing or a deflationary aspect of this, yes. That is distinctly possible. But keep in mind that these are organizations across the board that are between 90 and 95% funded through public dollars, government dollars. And unless government recognizes that responsibility.
But don't they have to get more creative now in terms of having buildings named after people, having endowments, and do the outside fundraising that, college campuses were in the same boat. They said, it should be state funded, SUNY schools. Now you see like University of Binghamton in big letters, and you see in small letters, very small, State University of New York at Binghamton, or State University of New York. And, and the University at Albany is only state funded by 15% of all their entire budget, 15%. 85% are private. Is private. So it's more like a private college that just sort of has a state tie to it.
I think the challenge here is that the financial viability or the economic sustainability, if you will, of these individuals who receive supports are oftentimes very challenged. So the ability to purchase that service, to find another payer is going to be, probably a generation long, if not longer, endeavor to move our system away from one that is focused on the capital and the government as the primary source of funding, and instead move that to business. That's a huge societal shift, and one we've actually seen the opposite taking place over the past 30 or 40 years.
But it's such an emotional issue that when you do fundraising, that's what gets to the heart of it, and people really give to emotional causes.
Yes, and we tap into that the best of our ability right now, and that amounts sometimes between 2 and 3% of a budget.
Right. Well, we could do a lot better, I'm saying, and maybe this will force you to do better.
Oh, that's a formidable challenge. I'm concerned that people will be hurt in the meantime.
Oh, wow. Okay. So when you make your case before the legislature, let's say at budget hearings or other opportunities you might have, are they taken with it? Are they saying, oh no, we have so many constraints and so many other obligations, we're doing all that we can, and this is all we can do, we can't do any more?
Particularly with the population of people with developmental disabilities, you see an awful lot of sympathy, I think, expressed among policymakers and lawmakers across the board. But when it comes to the time to make decisions about funding, we don't see these as priority areas. We typically see minuscule and sometimes even losing a little bit of ground when it comes to the ability to keep up with the changing times and the changing expenses of those times.
Is the autism spectrum part of developmental disability?
It is.
Because Assemblyman Angelo Santa Barbara
Yes.
has a son on the autism spectrum. I think there are other legislators also who
Yes.
have family members. Is Angelo a go-to guy for you?
Yeah, he's certainly taking a leadership role on this, and it comes from that very personal perspective, which drives so many of us, like myself, as a family member with a person with a developmental disability. That's how people get involved in this, and people have an emotional connection to it, and it drives their work, it drives their passion, and it's certainly driving his. And we're gonna rely on that in future years here if we're going to make any headway on these issues.
So what's your personal story?
I have a brother with a developmental disability, Down syndrome, lives in the Syracuse area. He lives in a house with 3 other gentlemen with Down syndrome.
A group home, they call it?
It is a group home, yes. He's been there for a little more than a decade, and he currently self-directs many of his day supports with the help of his family and a small group of individuals who are concerned about his well-being that have actually helped him move from volunteering at 8 locations in the Syracuse area to now taking a part-time job working for Goodwill in Syracuse.
But Down syndrome is not necessarily, it doesn't mean that, it could be really exceptional with Down syndrome.
Correct.
There's so many people, pianists or whatever, on the arts, and it sort of taps into one part of the brain more than the other, where you can really develop that and make it.
Like most disabilities and challenges, I think that those are very specific to each individual, and we need that environment in which we can cultivate that kind of opportunity for every person, and that's, I think, what we're seeing in this environment currently is a constraining of those opportunities for innovation and exploration.
Do you find that Down syndrome affects one ethnicity more than another?
I'm not aware that it does at all, no.
Okay.
Well, but more and more, like we were talking about, Mark, has so many people on the interview here, and that the, more and more people are diagnosed maybe with,
particularly in the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
There's a huge increase.
And do you know why? I keep on asking that. I don't know why I never get an answer, but I keep on, I just feel bad. I'm just saying that people are, you see a child that has problems. It just breaks my heart over here.
I think that there's probably a confluence of a few issues, one of which is likely that we're getting better at actually diagnosing things like autism and autism spectrum disorder, but we're also challenged, I think, from a scientific perspective to try and find some of those causes of this, and what are those environmental, are those hereditary, are those genetic, what are they? Those are questions that have not yet been fully answered, and I think that causes exactly the experience that you're getting, which is I'm not getting any clear answers. I think we're all looking for many of those answers still.
And your office provides, or your agency provides training for people around the state or around the country, or what is?
Yeah, we do some of that. We do provide technical assistance and training to many of our member organizations that are these kinds of provider organizations.
How many do you have?
We have 88 around the state right now. Okay. Here in the Capital Region, you have organizations like the Arc of Rensselaer County, for example. Those are many similarly situated types of organizations around the state. But we try to help them through so many of this challenging and constantly evolving environment which we're kind of navigating right now.
Now, ARC is just ARC now.
Yeah.
It used to be Association for Retarded Citizens.
And children before that,
and
depending on where you were.
That.
Yeah, yes.
And then was the word retarded changed for some other reason, or did it go to ARC right after that?
I think it's changed primarily because of the connotation with that, and many people with developmental disabilities have taken exception to that and find it to be oftentimes offensive, and they've expressed that. In fact, it resulted in the change from the Office for People with Mental Retardation and Developmental Disabilities to Office for People with Developmental Disabilities a few years back.
OMRDD was wiped out because of the word retarded in the...
That's right.
Yeah, so.
That's right. It's part of an evolution here, and I think it's recognizing, that's part of, I think, the important piece of this. It recognizes individuals with developmental disabilities are individuals first. They are not defined by their disability. And we need to, as a society, I think we need to be doing a better job of helping those individuals define themselves in that non-deficit way we were just talking about a few minutes ago.
I mean this in a very sensitive way. I don't want to come out the wrong way, but is there a reason why the word retarded is a bad word? Is it politically correct to say something else? I mean, why are we moving away from that word? It's fascinating in so many other aspects of why we change names or titles for one reason or another. So
I think you're touching on it. I think that there is a politically correct aspect of this, but it was driven by people with disabilities themselves saying, I don't like this, please don't call me that anymore. I find it offensive. And that's a really great thing to see people with disabilities standing up for themselves and articulating what they want and how they want to be defined and how they want to be addressed. So yeah, we've kind of put that away from a societal perspective. We've not yet put that away from a medical perspective. When you go and look at many of the diagnostic books, they still talk about mental retardation. But I think that we are indeed moving away from the use of that term more widely.
And is mental retardation in the books, but the word retarded is not, even though retard is part of retardation? I mean, is it something, I mean, in the lexicon?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it was taken out of that medical context into that societal context, and I think it's been used in such a derogatory way, particularly oftentimes by young people, that it was really taken as an offense, and it has been by and large moved away from.
Is that part of a bullying type word? If you're bullied in school and they call you a retard, is that something that
you're in the right neck of the woods? I think that's the type of experience that has driven this kind of change. Yes.
Well, you know, I'd like to say with the Lubavitch Rebbe, I'm from the Lubavitch movement, and in Hebrew, a hospital was called Beis Cholim, the house of the sick. And he says, why you go in there? You say, well, I must be sick. Something's wrong with me. It's Beis Harofim, the house of healing. So it's very interesting. It throws me off also because, again, one of my jobs is, like I told you, I like to get into it about prisoners, how they can be rehabilitated. But, they say you don't call prisoners, they're inmates, and, and on and all this different. So it's a little bit funny, like I guess that's what Mark is connected to. It was always a good word when we were, it's agencies are called it, and also, no, it's not correct. Don't say that, So in any case, there is an idea of a positive attitude if you say, hey, you're a special child instead of you're a disabled child. So there's something, it grows on you, there's
Right.
something special about it. But once I'm saying about that, is a prisoners part of your rehabilitation? They try to rehabilitate people in prisons, but a lot of times it's just learning how to mop the floor from being in there. And
Right.
I guess you need some janitors too, but I don't know if they're going to get a good profession out of that.
Some of the organizations within our membership do support people with psychiatric disabilities and other mental health conditions, some of whom have been in prison or in jail before.
Sure.
In fact, we're seeing some changes here at the state level right now in relation to the availability of Medicaid coming directly out of state prison. That's going to be a change, I think a very positive one, that helps to make that a smoother transition from the incarceration world to back into society.
Explain that some more.
I think we've seen so many people.
What's going on in the legislature that you say is this shift?
It is a shift, actually, that the governor has been taking, and I think taking some leadership on here, to make sure that people, when they are leaving the prison system, have the Medicaid eligibility that so many people oftentimes had when they entered that system. And that helps to smooth that. I think that helps to make that an easier transition from the incarcerated environment back to society as you have to kind of renegotiate, I guess, your environment, and getting access to some of those supports and services that are really going to be helpful in keeping you out of that trouble potential.
And it's important, Mark, because it's just like that. You can keep a prisoner away. They're all going to come out unless they have a life sentence, but majority are out. And, if they don't have a job, if they're not, they're just going to go back and steal or do drugs, which is a major problem in society, to say the least. And I think it's important, just basic, you say, well, be better. Be better how? They don't have the skills. They were dealing with drugs since they never learned the vocation, and now, give them a job, and hopefully they'll act like a normal, good citizen.
And these are skills. These are organizations that try to help provide those skills or help with those, cope with that issue, and to be able to give them some of the opportunity that to pursue, I think, a more a profession that would be more not likely to lead one to prison.
Excellent.
There's a time when we have the Cadillac of the Medicaid options, and the counties are talking about how they can't deal with rising costs in Medicaid, and they're taking up 80% of their budget. You want to increase Medicaid even more to include the prisoners that are coming out of jail. Where does that balance when you got the financial hardships already in place, and we have more Medicaid services than any other state in the nation?
I think part of that is balanced by the return on investment, if you will, when you get into some of these supports and services. Trying to help people avoid what is going to be another cost back to the county, quite frankly, or the locality, when it comes to an incarceration. That's a huge cost.
Articles even about welfare. How much is welfare and food stamps and this program and that program? And you give a person a normal job, how much are you saving the city, the county, the society who wants to get robbed, or being held up? You can't put a monetary number on that, and you take a person away from a criminal act, and now they're a normal person, living in an apartment, whatever have you, and paying taxes and doing that.
And from a policy perspective, we've seen a cap, a Medicaid cap imposed on the counties, on the municipalities in the state, and I think that's been, from that county perspective, I think has been by and large a positive experience. However, I think it comes with a lot of strings attached, where they are struggling to balance those budgets and keep them within those caps.
So I can't imagine that the Association of Counties is in favor of what what the governor is pushing.
On this one, honestly, I do not know. When it comes back to issues like our minimum wage issue, we need to
Reassess?
No, it's not a reassessment, but we need to understand and I think recognize, the state needs to recognize that, for example, when it has changes, that it imposes changes on the policies of the state of New York, that also applies to the state itself. And if costs are going to increase, then costs have to increase for also the state as well.
Now, you also previously served as Director of Mental Hygiene Services in the New York, on the governor's office?
In the governor's office, yes.
Under which governor?
Spitzer and Paterson.
Okay.
Interesting times.
Very much so. Talk about mental health services. They probably were the go-to guy.
I played a role in that, yes.
So, Yes. So what was that like, that experience like for you?
It's a fascinating experience. It really, it helps. I've made my way actually around several roles here in Albany, and I think it's helping me gain perspective on how best to try and influence the public policy debate that takes place here. I'm now keenly aware of the pressures that an administration faces in trying to deal with all the issues that it faces. But one of the things that has become really clear to me, it was clear back then, I think it's become even more clear now in our current environment, that government really only seems to function or act, if you will, when there's a crisis that is of some sort for those policymakers, for those individuals. And part of our job is to capitalize on crises, to advance some of these issues, but it's become a very challenging environment.
But Mark,
we saw that with Ebola, and now all of a sudden, since Ebola's not an issue, we haven't heard.
I don't know, just it seems to me that New York State is so sensitive to social and educational issues, and we have such a balloon budget because of that. I mean, you can say it's too much money. On the other hand, the good part is that there are spending for such programs. It seems like it's, I don't understand why a good program like yourself, in New York State is so socially minded. You have to fight for it. It should be, wow, this is a good program,
Because if you didn't fight for it, nothing has to be easy. Nothing can be easy in the legislature.
Right.
Otherwise, everyone would be doing it. You have to put up with that. You have to show that there's a little bit of a tug, and you're getting 80-90% because you don't want another group to know, well, if he got 100% of what he's looking for, why can't I? And there's all these other battles.
Yes, you're right. Well, you know the ins and outs over here. To me, I'm too
So,
simplistic. It's a good program. You get funded. 2 + 2 = 4.
We have a $300 billion budget if you were governor.
They throw me out over here.
So are there other issues as we wrap up the program that you wanted to mention that we didn't ask you about?
I'll just briefly talk about some of the environmental shifts that I think that are taking place here. One of which is this move toward managed care. So the Medicaid system is indeed moving toward a managed care system per the governor. And it's a formidable challenge, I think, for many of these organizations to start navigating and negotiating with managed care organizations to provide some of these services, like employment supports that, yes, are going to be dictated by a managed care organization. Trying to figure out how do we do that, and how do we structure that in such a way that really helps improve the lives of the individuals that we support. Lives like the lives of like my brother. That is a major challenge that many of these organizations are going through, and it's part of this larger environmental change that we're seeing. In the developmental disability side of things and on the behavioral health side, we are moving toward managed care. Behavioral health has already started that change, started that shift late last year. The rest of the state, after New York City was the pilot, goes later this year. In the developmental disabilities world, we're still trying to figure out what that means and what that structure will look like. But it's a very, very challenged effort, I think, because we are taking a system that was once, I think, very solid and concrete, if you will, in terms of what families of individuals with developmental disabilities could expect out of the service delivery system. We have changed that in fundamental ways from the policy perspective. We have changed that in fundamental ways from the reimbursement perspective. That has created an awful lot of chaos in this environment. And now we want to shift the entire thing to managed care. That scares an awful lot of us, quite frankly.
I guess it's job security for you.
Yeah, I guess it does. I guess it does mean that. However, it will mean a lot more gray hairs, though, too. So.
But I just think that there's a lot, and we'll have you back on the show, and we probably just cut the surface here.
Yeah, we could go a lot longer on these on these topics. Yeah.
So I appreciate you being on the show.
Mike, you're doing great work, and just like I say, to me, it's obvious that it should be funded, but I'm not the governor yet, and you got my vote, really. maybe. And in any case, you're doing great work, and I think for our viewers also should know that. Maybe they should give a little push also, because that's how government works.
That's right.
That if people say, hey, there's some program and we need it, and got a concern for all our citizens. And more, yes. When I was a child, people didn't care about that much about the development, disabled people. I think there's more sensitivity. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely, no question.
More and more it's in the public's mind that you got to you know, the handicap parking spaces, just little things. But, well, I'm just saying, people are concerned, hey, you know, there's sidewalks. Oh, you know, I have a wheelchair. Well, how are you going to get up a 2-inch, you know, sidewalk? So these things never happened, and now they're, you know, people are more sensitive. So you're doing great work. We're out of time, but we're going to carry you back when you tell us some good news about how much you achieved, and do it with great success.
Much success,
Happy to.
continued
Thank
success.
you. Thank you for having me.